Hey guys, Dev here, and the question for this video is, what the hell is a callback, and why do we need them? Callbacks are essentially methods that get passed into the parameters of other methods for later execution. This is a great tool and essential for asynchronous programming. Alright, now let's make an example of a function that utilizes a callback. So let's create a function called cat. And we want to execute cat. Okay, nothing's going on right now. So we want a parameter that can be executed, right? That would be our callback. So let's create a parameter called meow, and let's execute meow. This is our callback. If you look at the console down below, meow is not a function. So the parameter that we pass in order for it to be a callback, needs to be a function. So we can define a function out here. You can say it's cat says. And we can pass it in cat says, and inside cat says we could say console.log meow, right? So here's how it's going. So we created cat. It takes in a parameter meow, and meow is being executed. But meow cannot execute unless it's a function. So we'll pass in a function cat says into the parameters of cat, which is now going to be meow internally, and we're going to execute meow, which is our callback. So if you look here, cat says meow. So why would we want to do this? Well, we can have things inside cat that do some like method, execute some methods, do some calculation, update some variables. So it would say message from the cat is per. Well, we can pass in parameters into our callbacks because they're just functions that we've created. So we would say the message. Now cat says is taking in this message, so we can take that message and if you see, that message got passed into that console log and now it's per. Okay, that's really cool. So what other things can we do with this? Well, callbacks can be called later, right? So we can come up with an example of that down below. Let me comment this out. So let's create a function called dog, right? And we'll create another function called bark, and we'll execute dog. But we'll pass in the function bark. But hold on, let's say we want to delay the dog's bark. Okay, we'll say we'll delay the dog's bark over 1 second. And so we'll take in we'll just call it callback for the sake of this example. And we'll say seconds, right? And what we can do is do a set timeout, and we can feed it our callback and the seconds. And now we can make this dog bark a second later. So we call bark, and it should call bark a second later after execution. That's nice. So we could do console.log. If you look in here, dog goes bark, but hold on. Wait, let me show you this. Console.log. Look at the console down below. If you noticed, it goes dog goes growl then bark. the usefulness of callbacks is us deciding when the execution is about to happen. So if you look here, JavaScript's asynchronous, and this is an asynchronous call. So this is not going to happen in order. So dog is the function that gets executed, right? And we have a function bark, and it gets passed into dog, and that's our callback. So in the set timeout, we're going to call bark over a period of 1 second, but growl is not going to wait for that second. It's actually going to execute before the set timeout, because the timeout has seconds in between. This is kind of the beauty of JavaScript being asynchronous. Okay, so if you noticed here, this is kind of the same exact structure, because set timeout does have take in a function which is basically an internal callback. Okay, so what's another example? So we have a button, and we have a message, and here's our DOM elements, and I'm gonna make the message appear on button click. But first, which buttons have something called a add event listener. And they take in the first parameter, which is a string, and what the action that we want, and it takes in a second parameter, which is gonna be the internal callback for this. So console.log I have been clicked, and let me comment out dog bark. Right? So if we click this button says I have been clicked. But we can have it do other things too. So I have a method down here called throw message. And if I were to click the button, my message should show up. Woohoo! Okay. But now let's do another thing. Set timeout, hide message. And we're gonna hide this message after 2 seconds of being clicked. Woohoo! And the message should hide pretty soon. This is an example of methods in JavaScript that uses callbacks. Okay, so what's the gist of this? So here's the gist. So we have a function that takes in a parameter that can be executed. Right? So, and this parameter is going to be equal to the function. So I'm going to call this caller real quick. And it takes in a function and that function is now known as callback, or the name by the name callback, or variable callback, and it gets executed.